people remember how it made them feel. Did it make them feel inspired, right? And people remember that. When they watch a movie or a show, they want to have an experience that sticks with them emotionally. When everybody watches The Rings of Power, they don't feel anything. The show's not making you feel anything. For the people who don't like the show, because they're fans of the books, it makes them feel angry. It makes them feel defensive. It makes them feel disrespected because they were looking forward to the idea of more Lord of the Rings, more Middle Earth stories coming to cinema and having those same emotional experiences that they can rally behind and truly love for the next generation. And this show is not delivering at all. Towards the end of the interview, there was an interesting point where they kind of talk about how they feel about all of the hate that they have received through the show, right? And so I have a lot of thoughts with this. So I'm going to be going through it, giving my commentary throughout. So let's just go ahead and jump into this, and we'll take it piece by piece. All right.
Kind of going external from the show a little bit here. We kind of live in a time where, I feel like people are constantly being pushed toward binary arguments on just about everything. And I'm curious, as showrunners of a show that's got huge viewership of fans, but JD, I know, this quote was out there a little bit ago, there's also a good number of trolls and stuff.
Which, by the way, good ups on Matt for just bringing this up during an interview, because a lot of people just don't touch it because they realize how much hate the show has, how much people are upset with both season 1 and season 2 of the show. And so it's a good look, I think, even bring it up, because the few times they have brought it up, they kind of just shrug it off. Like he said, trolls, right?
So how do you separate out, as you look at the criticism around your show, what's good faith criticism and what's not? Or do you guys just kind of tune out everything and plug away on the story and just kind of try to block out all the noise?
We yearn for good faith criticism. It's so important. It's vital. And so, I think you can often tell pretty quickly when you start reading something, if it's someone who is genuinely engaging in good faith with the material that's there, and, has things that work for them, things that didn't work for them, things they want to be better. Sometimes people just come with an axe to grind. And when they start hurling invectives and, being insulting and demeaning to either our collaborators or to the process we've gone through, or any of those things, that just becomes sort of like spiritually and creatively corrosive. And
it's interesting that he brings in the process they've gone through. Look, what he's saying sounds nice. What he's saying sounds nice. The thing is, I don't think it's genuine. And even if it comes from a genuine place, I don't believe them. I don't think that they really take any of what fans care about, the actual history of Middle Earth, what's been written by first J.R.R. Tolkien and then his son Christopher Tolkien, who expanded so far into the lore and the history of this world, that I don't think they really care. I think what they said, good faith criticism, and then what is kind of just, I guess you might say, just criticism and divisive and mean in some fashion. I don't think they have like a really good line on how to define that. It's a really good thing to say, but I don't think it's true. I don't think there's actually a way they would define it, because there's been people presenting good faith criticism before season 1 came out, when just the trailer was there. And there has been people who all along the way have been presenting, hey, this is making me upset. You should be doing this. They did a whole season 2, and it felt like they didn't listen to a single thing, a single piece of criticism that was said in season 1 by the fans or by people, the conversation online.
then you know it's not actually going to help. It doesn't help anyone become a better boxer to practice getting sledgehammers like hitting their face, but it does help to have a good sparring partner, and so if you can tell that someone is coming with to come to the gym with you and spar with you, then great, game on. Like,
that's the whole conversation online. Look, if you want to ignore, like, if you want to say it's mean, and I want to ignore all of like the issues where people are like, oh, this is just, it's so stupid that there's like other races or something in it. It's whatever. All right. Now, like a factual criticism is like women dwarves should have beards. Okay. That's a small one. You can take that into consideration. It seems like they kind of did, because they gave him a little bit of sideburns in season 2. But I don't think that the idea of, a sledgehammer or a sparring partner is well defined. It's just something that is said, because it's like, if you could just watch people's reviews online, and even if they make fun of your show, there's still valid criticism in there, right? Some of it is a little mean and harsh, but it's well deserved.
We'll take those, we'll listen to them, and take it all in good faith.
But a lot of it, I have to say, at the end of the day, we just got to tune it out, because here's the thing.
Yeah.
I say
that's the real answer. They just tune it out. And I actually have a theory. I think there's a lot more people than just these two tied to that. They're like the face, they're the creators. I think they've been given so many directives by what they have to include in the show that they, in some ways, have their hands tied. I think that I don't think both of them, but I think at least one of them has a really vast knowledge of Middle Earth that was not utilized in the slightest with this show. I feel like everything that's kind of Tolkienism, as they like to always say, Tolkienism or whatever, I think it's not really. It's just alluding to the Peter Jackson movies. It's not actually alluding to the books, right? Or actually building on the Second Age events, because they fundamentally changed everything. You go to like the character the show is built around, Galadriel, and I covered this a few weeks back. They started in a disingenuous place, because they said our first thoughts, like one of the first things that they wanted to do was to make Galadriel, but not like the Lady Galadriel, but make her a general and put a sword in her hand and have her fighting orcs. Like, that was one of their first decisions. And they should have known that that's like so incorrect and not even slightly in the same ballpark as Galadriel during the Second Age in the books. Like, that shouldn't have even been a conversation. So their creative process is not really a process. And it seems like if you have criticism of it, they don't really take it into consideration, even if they say they do. I think the sparring partners that they might say they have are probably internal and probably are not very knowledgeable about the history of Middle Earth. I think they think this canon, this legendarium, is essentially people that were working on the show. I think it's just open to create whatever they want, right? They have characters that are just being able to be moved around like chess pieces on the Middle Earth map, and change the events, change the timeline of everything, compress the timeline, and fundamentally make everything feel shallow.
Say this, and I don't know if people believe it when we say this, but like, we are our own harshest critics. There's nothing anyone can say about the show that one of us hasn't already said, oh, this didn't turn out, oh, that was supposed to be better, oh, that didn't work,
I would say I would hope that they really wanted this show to feel big and like in scope and to feel like Middle Earth, and both seasons have just felt so tight and claustrophobic. Like, they have these big sweeping drone shots, but they're just like animated like landscape shots, right? And then like in Numenor, right, there's these big, beautiful, completely probably CGI shots of the city, like sweeping shots. And then we go to like a little corner of a town, like inside the city, and it just feels like a stage set with like 8 people around. It's just so everything that even Eregion, like how much of Eregion did we see? We saw like the courtyard that had like 12 people in it, 12 elves. And then during the battle, it was like the orcs, there was hordes and hordes of orcs. And inside Eregion, it felt like there was like 12, like probably 15 women trying to escape the city. And like, I don't know, maybe 16 soldiers. Like that city felt small and unoccupied. And I think maybe that's one thing that like in production, they're like, oh, I thought this would look epic, but it just kind of feels empty. That's probably a factor. I would really hope that they felt that way watching it, because that makes the most sense. Joshua's in the chat. Nerd, bro, get off the live and stop calling me a nerd in the live stream. All right.
And yeah, to the point, we actually made a pact with each other as season 1 came out that we would not hurl reviews at each other to back up points that one of us would have made during the development.
but we
So basically, like during production, they weren't allowed to bring up past arguments about what they wanted to do differently. Okay, whatever, that's fine.
to get better every season, every episode, every hour, and you know, at the end of the day, no one's going to be a harsher critic than we are on it. We want it to be the greatest thing ever, and it's never going to be. So there's always going to be something we could have done better, and we're always going to lay it all on the field.
Well, okay, that's valid. All right, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be what it is supposed to be, right? Like in the books, it's never going to reach that height. So let's just say there's a line. All right, let me do it here. Let's just say there's a line, and this is like the peak, okay? This is the peak that you can hit for Legendarium, and it's like the books, okay? It's the original works of Tolkien and his son Christopher written in the books, all right? And then let's just say, at best, the Jackson trilogy lines up somewhere here, okay? The Jackson trilogy doesn't even hit the books, rightly so. There's a lot of pieces missing, and cinematically, you can't grasp the scope of it. All right. So I would be happy if they were at least aiming for the books, they would land somewhere, somewhere closer to the top. But I feel like they just wanted to write their own story, and they just end up like way down here. Like there's nothing, you're not even close to the Jackson trilogy. I felt like they were aiming for the Jackson trilogy, and they fell super short of that. So if you're talking about middle age, the second age, you're supposed to be shooting for the books. That's the source material. Shoot for the events of the second age. But they didn't do that. They just created their own story, wanted to be like the Jackson trilogy. That's why there's so many member berries and callbacks, not to the books, but to the Peter Jackson trilogy in this show. And there's hardly any recognizable moments from the books or from the history of the second age. Like the characters they don't look the way they're described in the book. They don't act the way they're described in the book. The timeline of events are not what the book has. The characters are not they don't even have a complete family. Like Galadriel's supposed to have a husband and a child during the second age of Middle Earth. And so maybe they're going to bring Celeborn into it later. And maybe they're going to introduce like her having a kid or something. But at this point, when the Rings of Power were created, she's supposed to have like a fairly old daughter. Like I don't see the point in changing that history. You can tell a story based on that. There's this idea that so many people have that in order to do an adaptation of a book, you can't do everything right, but you can do a lot right. Like Peter Jackson's trilogy did a lot right. It didn't quite hit the height of the books. I don't think that's possible. I agree with him there, but it can do a lot to remain respectful of the source material and to actually do justice and attempt to put it on screen. But that's not what we got. That's not what we got at all. I really do feel like they're not being genuine. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, especially in the internet space. When we're taking time to review, when we're taking time to watch all of these episodes, We expect there to be a respect. We expect there to be respect of the time invested.
How were you first introduced to Tolkien?
Patrick, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think it was actually the Rankin Bass Hobbit. I think I saw it when I was really
Same, actually.
young, made a huge impression, and I read the book like in short order, and fell for it, and then moved on to Fellowship and Towers, after that, when I was probably 12, 13, somewhere in there. So when the Peter Jackson films were, in the hopper, I was the guy like looking forward to it. Like, I wonder what Tom Bombadil will look like. I'm still wondering.
That's annoying. Like, why you gotta, again, this obsession with trying to be like or compete with the Jackson trilogy. They think they're so much better than Peter Jackson and all the people who made those movies, who are loved. Like, people love those movies very dearly, and they want so badly to compete with it. They're literally pulling it down to try to be like, we're better than you because we introduced Tom Bombadil. Well, I got news for you. A lot of people weren't like thrilled to see your version of Tom Bombadil in the story.
No. But no, so I was a book first guy from when I was probably, 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there. Yeah.
And I came to the party a little later in life, seeing the Jackson films. I've been a big fantasy fan, but I was more on the C.S. Lewis side of the ledger than.
That's interesting. I guess he's a Narnia fan.
I mean, I grew up with all those books, reading them, but then so saw the Jackson films, then obviously fell in love with Middle Earth, did the deep dive, then read the books, read the Silmarillion, learned Elvish, all of the above, and never looked back.
Very cool. Now, take us back. I've got a lot of questions here, so
I really hope it's genuine, that he's like has a real genuine interest in it. And I based on like what I've heard in interviews, he's referenced a lot of things. So I hope it's genuine. But at the same time, it kind of feels like when you see the show, you're like, I don't see how anybody on earth who likes Tolkien would make the show. It seems like people who don't like Tolkien would make this show, because there's so much of the fundamentals about the story that are just completely disregarded.
We're gonna try to get through them all in the time we've got. Take us back to when you were first coming up for the pitch for Rings of Power. What is it about the Second Age story that kind of drew you in and led you to focus on this particular story?
It's a tragedy. It's a different kind of story. It's a different story than Lord of the Rings, but it couldn't be more Tolkienian. And it happens to have some of our favorite characters from the Third Age. So those two things put together, and the idea that it was, I mean, again, as I say, it's a tragedy.
They say they're their favorite characters, but they didn't do justice by these characters.
It was a different kind of journey, and would potentially be a complementary journey, not one that was competing. At least that's what we thought at the time.
But also, I mean, you start the Jackson films, and those first 5 minutes are so.
What did he say?
And would potentially be a complementary journey, not one that was competing. At least that's what we thought. Journey, and would potentially be. I mean, again, as I say, it's a tragedy. It was a different kind of journey, and would potentially be a complementary journey, not one that was competing. At least that's what we thought at the time.
So he actually, I think he's alluding to the Jackson trilogy. And so he actually does, he says the original intent was to be complementary, but he didn't, that's what they believed at the time, instead of competing. It's so clearly that they are competing with the Jackson trilogy, but nobody's like in their minds saying this is as good as that. Like, nobody's saying this show is as good as the Jackson trilogy. So it's like all within inside the studio, I feel like.
But also, I mean, you start the Jackson films, and those first 5 minutes are so tantalizing. It began with the 4 great rings, and 3 were made for the elves, and 7 for the dwarves, and 9 for men. Instantly, a million questions and ideas come into your head. You're like, well, who were those elves, and who were those dwarves, and who were those men? Why would they take the rings? What was going on in their kingdoms? What were they tempted by? What did the rings do? How did it help them? How did it hurt them? Like, it just births a million stories in your head. It just every time you learn anything about Tolkien, it makes you want to dig deeper, and then you learn more and you dig deeper after that. And so we reckon if you could take those 5 minutes and turn them into 5 seasons of story, that would be a story worth telling.
When I watched Lord of the Rings for the first time, when I first watched Lord of the Rings, I thought, I want to do film. Like I want to make movies. Like it inspired me so hard that I was like, I want to do that because that's awesome. That makes me feel something, right? And I've had that feeling every time I turn on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I have that same feeling. When I read the books, I actually read the books after I watched the Jackson trilogy, and I would have to say that I like the books better, but it doesn't change the Jackson trilogy for me. I still have those very good feelings. And here's the thing about cinema, when you're telling stories, people will remember how it makes them feel more than they remember like what they were told, like exactly what a character said or what the message of the film was. People remember how it made them feel. Did it make them feel sad? Did it make them feel victorious? Did it make them feel inspired? Right. And people remember that when they watch a movie or a show, they want to have an experience that sticks with them emotionally. And the things, the content, like the communication, isn't necessarily what sticks with you. It's the feelings, right? And I feel as though when everybody watches The Rings of Power, if you like it, you're just kind of like, oh, that's cool. There's some cool looking orcs. They're shooting arrows and stuff, and we're in Middle Earth again. You know, that's what I think people who like the show probably think, but they don't feel anything. The show's not making you feel anything. For the people who don't like the show, because they're fans of the books, it makes them feel angry. It makes them feel defensive, and it makes them feel rightly justified. It makes them feel disrespected because they were looking forward to the idea of more Lord of the Rings, more Middle Earth stories coming to cinema and having those same emotional experiences that they can rally behind and truly love for the next generation. And this show is not delivering at all. There's nothing about this show that makes you feel anything. For me, only frustration. Sometimes laughter. And by laughter, it means like I'm just blown away by the decisions they've made in this show. And so, no, I don't think that there's any kind of competition between this show because one is built with heart and built with scrappiness, right? The first time no one believed that the books could be adapted to cinema. No one believed that. And they did it, and it worked, and people loved it, and fans adore it. 20 years after it's been released. And this show is like, as soon as, I don't know if they're going to cancel it before 5 seasons or they're going to make it all the way to 5 seasons. It doesn't matter how far they make it. As soon as it is finished, it will be forgotten and it'll be a fart in the wind. Like no one's going to remember this show. It's going to be a ton of money dumped into something that doesn't have a foundation to last through the decades, to go to the next generation. The Jackson trilogy will continue on without a doubt and with ease. It will continue on. This show will not. It just won't, because there's nothing about it that has heart. There's nothing about it that makes you feel anything. It's all just kind of dull. There's some interesting action moments. There's some interesting visuals. But at the end of the day, like everything about it's just empty. And if you want to talk about, as I said earlier, when he was saying valid criticisms, I would say start making the show caring about what Tolkien cared about. It's what Peter Jackson said. He said, we're not interested in presenting our own ideas and our own modern day, beliefs and messages into the films. We want to do a story about what Tolkien cared about, right? Both J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien, his son. But they spent so much, Christopher Tolkien spent his entire career building out the legendarium of his father. And And I think that's important, to care about what the original creators cared about and approach it in that manner. And I think if you did it in that way and you had some skilled storytellers behind it, it would come across as truly an experience that's worth remembering. But this current thing that's going on, season 1 and 2, is not it. It's not it at all. And I would say a valid criticism is like in the season 3, goodness, freaking make the story feel bigger. Stop making it feel like a stage play every time we zoom in on a scene. Make these characters actually have some heart. As quickly as you can, realign with the books and stop this nonsense that we've seen in season 1 and season 2, and stop pointing back to the movies. Point back to the books, man. Like, point to the books and stop trying to get like a one-up on the Jackson trilogy, because that's supposed to be way down the road. Stop doing these callbacks, because we don't care about that. You're not going to be tied into the very successful movies. You have to be successful by yourself. And if you can't pull it off, then you're done. And that's what I would say. It, like, a valid criticism is take it way more seriously than it's being taken right now, because a ton of money is being dumped into this show. And it's very frustrating to see 2 full seasons of complete garbage. Like, there's nothing about it that is engaging or interesting. Anything that even remotely starts to scratch the edge of interesting is completely muffled by the amount of garbage and sludge we had to walk through to get here. Like, actually make this fun. Make it an emotional experience. Get us to care about these characters, because almost every episode in season 1 and season 2, I'm struggling not to fall asleep. I'm just bored because this is not fun. I'm not having a good time. And that's what this whole thing's supposed to be about. Having a good time, and it's not fun. It's not fun.